Everything changed that Mother's Day. My millionaire son walked in, looked me straight in the eyes, and asked, "Mom, are you happy with the $800 Janet sends every month?" I smiled through my silence and whispered, "Son, it's not the money that keeps me alive, it's the church." But before I could explain, his wife walked in, and what happened next left everyone in tears. "Mom, are you happy with the $800 Janet sends every month?" My millionaire son asked me on Mother's Day. He stood by my small kitchen table with a serious face, the kind that makes the whole room go quiet. I held my cup of tea with two hands to stop them from shaking. I looked up at him and whispered, "Son, the church keeps me alive." The words were soft, but they filled the room like a bell. Just then, his wife walked in. She held a small brown envelope against her chest. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying. She looked at me, then at my son, and said, very quietly, "There is something you both need to know about Janet." She took a step closer and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded paper and a tiny silver key on a string. My son leaned forward. I could hear my own heartbeat. She opened her mouth to speak. Earlier, before this moment, my day had started in a simple way. The sun came in like a warm hand and touched the old lace curtains in my sitting room. I am Grandma Grace, and my little house smells like soap, onions, and the lemon polish I use on the wooden chair that used to belong to my mother. My life is small, but it is full. There are flowers in a blue cup on the window. There is my Bible with petals pressed inside. There is the soft hum of the fridge that sometimes snores at night like a cat. I walk slowly in the morning and say a small prayer for each step. I thank God for my legs, for the roof, for hot water, and for the people at church who make my days sweet even when money is not sweet. People say my son, Michael, is important. They say he is a millionaire who wears neat suits and talks in meetings with big glass walls. He has a driver and a tall building where he works. But to me, he is still the boy who used to run after the ice cream truck, who once brought home a lost bird in his pocket, and who would fall asleep on my lap with a cookie in his hand. Time can put gold in a man's bank, but a mother's mind keeps the picture of a boy with crumbs on his cheek. Months ago, a woman named Janet began to send $800 to me at the start of each month. There was never a letter, only a little card that said, "For Grandma. Use this for food, medicine, and whatever makes you smile." I did not know who Janet was. I asked the mailman once if he knew, and he shrugged and smiled. "Maybe a kind angel," he said. I laughed and told him angels use wings, not envelopes, but inside I wondered. Sometimes I thought it might be an old friend from church who did not want to show her name. Sometimes I thought it was someone who used to work with Michael and wanted to help his mother. Sometimes I thought it was a stranger who knew I liked to buy apples even when apples were a little too expensive. The money helped, yes, but money is only the spoon, not the soup. What kept me alive was the church. The church is where people see me, hold my hands, and say my name like it matters. On Sundays, I sit near the aisle in the third row. The choir sings. The children smile at me because I always have peppermint candy. Pastor Thomas shakes my hand and asks about my knees. After service, we share food in the hall. We laugh. We tell stories. When my light bill was high last winter, the church deacons came with a plan. When my old kettle broke, the women's group took an offering and brought me a new one with little flowers painted on it. When I could not sleep after a bad dream, Sister Joy came by with hot cocoa and a blanket that smelled like sunshine. Money pays for things, but people pay attention, and that kind of love is what keeps a soul warm. Not all days are sweet like cocoa. There are low days, too. There was a time last year when my ankle swelled like bread dough. I could not go to church for 2 weeks. The house felt too quiet. I sat in my chair and listened to the fridge hum and the clock tick, and I felt as small as the tiny dust in the sunbeam. On the third day of that quiet, the church choir came to my porch and sang my favorite hymn. They brought soup in glass jars and placed them on the table by the door. I cried and cried, then laughed because crying and laughing often hold hands in this life. There are high days as well. There was a Sunday when a little girl named Hannah read a poem she wrote for me. She stood on a wooden box to reach the microphone. "Grandma Grace is brave," she said in her small voice. "She prays for us and brings candy. Everyone clapped. I felt tall like a tree. That night, I slept with the poem under my pillow and woke up with a smile. My son came less often as his life became bigger and louder. I told him not to worry. I told him to do his work and be kind. When he did come, he would bring flowers or a basket of fruit. He would sit and pretend to enjoy my old TV show. He would look at his phone, then put it away, then look again. He would ask if I needed anything, and I would say, I need your time, but I will take an apple. He would kiss my forehead and say he loved me. I believed him. Love is not a number of visits. Love is a root that holds even when the wind is rough. On the first day of each month, the envelope came. $800. Neat. Clean. Strange, but kind. I kept a notebook where I wrote how I spent it, like a student who wants a gold star. Eggs. Milk. Medicine. A donation for the youth camp at church. New shoes for a boy who sang alto but wore shoes with holes in them. The money always stretched, because when you share, things somehow grow. I would sit at my table, look at the notebook, and whisper, "Thank you, Janet, whoever you are." Then Mother's Day arrived. I made tea with cinnamon and put honey in it because honey feels like a hug in a cup. I polished the wooden chair, set out a plate of biscuits, and placed a white napkin beside it like a flower. I put on my blue dress with tiny white dots. I pinned a small brooch to my collar. I brushed my hair. I prayed a short prayer for my son's heart and his day. When Michael walked in, his steps were strong but his eyes were soft. He kissed my cheek. He smelled like a new car mixed with soap. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," he said. He gave me a box with a ribbon. Inside was a silk scarf that felt like a cloud. "Oh, it is too fancy for my old neck," I said, but I held it like a treasure. He smiled but did not sit. He looked around the house as if he was checking the walls, the floor, the air. He cleared his throat, and I knew the talk was coming. The one about the envelopes. "Mom," he said, looking right at me, "are you happy with the $800 Janet sends monthly?" A bird crossed the window just then, and the light moved across his face, like water. The question tasted like metal in my mouth. It was kind and sharp at the same time. I could have talked about my notebook. I could have said the money paid for the pressure pills and the warm sweater and the 2 bags of rice that we shared at church. But the truest answer rose from the deep place in me where prayers live. I put my cup down and said, "Son, the church keeps me alive." I said it softly, like holding a bird. I did not mean the building. I meant the people. I meant the love. I meant God. In their hands and feet. He nodded, but there was a storm behind his eyes, the kind you can see coming even when the sky is still blue. His mouth opened like he had a second question, maybe a third, but before he could speak, we heard the soft click of the front door. His wife, Lily, stepped in. Lily is a kind woman. She wears simple dresses and keeps her hair in a neat bun. Her eyes notice small things, like crumbs on the table or sadness on a face. She once brought me a jar of orange marmalade with the peel cut into tiny squares. "This tastes like sunshine," I told her, and she smiled. But this time, there was no sunshine in her smile. Her eyes were red. She held a brown envelope against her chest with both hands, as if it was a baby bird she must not drop. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," she said to me. Her voice was careful. She looked at Michael, then at me, and took a slow breath, the kind you take when you must say something you have been holding for a long time. "There is something you both need to know about Janet," she said. The room shrank to the size of the space between her lips and the envelope. My son stepped closer. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, 3 times. She slipped a tiny silver key on a string out of the envelope, and a folded paper with neat black letters. My hands felt cold even though the room was warm. Before she spoke again, my mind traveled back to the first Janet envelope. It had arrived on a day with rain in the gutters. I had just returned from church with a bag of rolls and a hymn still on my tongue. The mailman handed me a thick white envelope. "A gift," he said with a wink. When I opened it, the $800 stared up at me like a surprise guest. I sat down in my chair and prayed right away. I asked God to bless Janet, to bless her hands, her heart, and her house. I asked him to let this money do only good and never harm. I did not know then how this prayer would circle back to my own family like a bird that knows its way home. Days after the first envelope, our church youth group needed funds for a trip to read to children at a hospital. I took a part of the money and gave it to Sister Joy. Her eyes filled with tears. "Grandma Grace, you always show up at the right time," she said. I laughed and told her it was not me but God's clock. That night, I made a pot of soup and sent my son a picture. "I am fine," I typed with my heavy thumbs. He sent a heart. I went to bed and dreamed I was planting orange seeds, and they grew into trees heavy with bright fruit. In the months that followed, the money kept coming. My needs were met, and my giving grew. A boy got shoes. A girl got school notebooks. A mother got diapers for her baby. My medicine was paid for every time. Blessings moved like water through pipes. You cannot drink from a pipe that is blocked. I kept the pipe open, and the water of help flowed into me and out of me. I was alive, not because of a number on paper, but because I lived in a river of care. This is what I meant when I told my son the church keeps me alive. Now, back in my kitchen on Mother's Day, Lily held the small key and the folded paper. She took a tiny step closer and looked me in the eyes. "Mom," she said, "I should have told you this sooner. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting peace." She looked at Michael, and his jaw was tight. I felt a tremble in my hands, so I placed them flat on the table to keep them still. "What is it, Lily?" I asked. My voice sounded like the last light of day, soft and tired, but ready. She opened the paper. I could not read the words from where I sat, but I saw a logo at the top and neat lines of writing. The key in her hand shone under the kitchen light like a drop of morning on a leaf. She took a breath. The room held itself very still. Even the fridge seemed to stop humming to listen. "Janet," Lily said, "is not who you think she is." She turned the paper so we could see. The first line looked like a bank name. There was a list of transfers. There was a name beside them. Michael leaned in and stared. His face changed. He looked at the key, then at Lily, then at me. I felt the world tilt a little, like a boat in a sudden wave. I thought of my notebook, of eggs, of medicine, of church children in shoes without holes. I thought of the first envelope on the rainy day. I thought of my prayer for Janet. I thought of my son as a boy with a lost bird in his pocket and of my son as a man with a heavy watch and a driver. I thought of Lily's careful eyes and her marmalade with peel cut into tiny squares. I tried to breathe slow. "Please, say it clearly," I whispered. Lily pressed her lips together, then spoke. "Mom," she said, "Janet is," she stopped, swallowed, and held out the key and the paper to my son. Her hand shook. "And this key opens the place where you will see why." Before she could finish the sentence, before she could say the name that would turn our world, there was a loud knock at the front door. Not a gentle knock. A hard, urgent knock that made the cups on the shelf rattle. Michael and I both looked up. Lily turned her head, eyes wide. The knock came again, faster, like a drum calling soldiers. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice thin. No one answered. The knock sounded once more, then the door handle turned slowly, and the door began to open. The door creaked open, and a tall man stepped inside. He was wearing a dark brown jacket, and rainwater dripped from his shoulders even though the sky outside had been bright just moments ago. He had a face that looked familiar, but I could not place him right away. He removed his hat slowly and said in a calm voice, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Grace. Forgive me for coming unannounced." My son's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" he asked, moving closer to me. Lily took a step back, still clutching the key and the folded paper in her hand. "My name is Henry," the man said. "I'm from the bank, Maple Trust Savings." He held a small black folder under his arm. "I came regarding the monthly deposits made under the name Janet Miller." My heart jumped. The name, Janet Miller. It hung in the air like thunder about to roll. My son looked at me, then at Henry. "What do you mean?" he asked in a tone that was part confusion, part warning. Henry opened the folder and took out a thin stack of papers. "I didn't mean to interrupt your day," he said, "but there have been irregularities with the account. The sender, Janet Miller, listed your name, Mrs. Grace, as the receiver for repeated transfers over the last year. However," he paused. His eyes moved between us. Janet Miller passed away 2 years ago. The air left the room. My hands tightened around my teacup. The sound of the clock ticking was the only thing that dared to move. That's not possible, I said softly. I get the envelopes every month. I've been using them. Henry nodded gently. I understand, ma'am, but the account was active long after her death. Someone has been using her name to send the funds. Michael looked at Lily. Lily, he said, his voice now sharp and trembling, what's going on? She didn't answer. Her lips trembled. Tears started to fill her eyes. Michael, she whispered, I was going to tell you today. That's why I brought the key. It's not what you think. Michael raised his hand. Then tell me what I should think. He shouted. His voice cracked like glass. I stood up slowly, my knees weak. Please, both of you, calm down, I said. Let's hear her out. Lily wiped her face with the back of her hand. After Janet died, she said, I found her old files when I was still working at Maple Trust Bank. She was one of my clients. She had written in her notes about a Grace, who once helped her when her son was sick, someone from the church who had prayed for her and brought her meals. When I saw your name, Mom, I realized it was you. Janet had wanted to help you but never got the chance before she passed away. My mouth opened slightly. I remembered Janet now. She had come to our church years ago, a quiet woman with a sick child. We had prayed together. I used to bring her soup and small things. I never saw her after that. I just thought, Lily continued, her voice breaking, that it was a sign. So, I used her inactive account to keep sending you money each month. I only wanted to honor her wish, to help you. I didn't mean to lie. I used my own salary for it sometimes, Michael, not yours. Please understand. Michael's face softened for a moment, then darkened again. You used someone else's identity, he said slowly. You forged transactions in a dead woman's name. Do you have any idea how serious that is? I know, she whispered. But I couldn't bear to see your mother living so simply while we have everything. I wanted to help without hurting your pride. My heart ached. Pride. That small, sharp word sat heavy between us. Henry stepped forward carefully. Sir, he said, no legal complaint has been made yet. We only came to confirm who was receiving the funds. If you wish, we can settle this quietly. The bank can close the account permanently. Michael nodded stiffly but didn't speak. Lily's shoulders trembled. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. I walked closer and placed my hand on hers. Her skin was cold, her fingers shaking. You tried to help, I said softly. You did wrong, yes, but you meant well. God knows your heart. Michael turned away. He stood by the window, looking out at the cloudy sky that had started to turn gray. You should have told me, he said finally. You should have trusted me to take care of her. Lily sniffled. I didn't think you would understand. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the sound of rain began to fall, gentle but steady. It tapped against the glass like fingers begging to be let in. Then Henry closed his folder and said quietly, I'll take my leave. Please decide how you want to handle the account. There's no immediate penalty, but you should close it soon. He nodded politely and stepped back outside, disappearing into the rain. As the door closed, the silence in the room felt bigger than before. I looked at my son. Michael, I said gently, don't be angry. She did wrong, but she did it out of love. He didn't answer. He just kept staring out the window. The muscles in his jaw moved like waves under his skin. Then suddenly, he turned, grabbed his car keys, and said, I need to see something. Where are you going? I asked. To Janet's old address, he said. If this is true, I want to see it myself. He rushed out before I could stop him. The sound of the car starting outside echoed through the small house like thunder. Lily sank to the floor and covered her face with her hands. I knelt beside her slowly, my knees aching. It's going to be okay, I said. Truth always comes out to clean what's dirty. Sometimes it hurts, but it saves us. She looked up at me, her eyes full of fear. Mom, there's something else about that key, she whispered. What is it? I asked. She opened her palm. The small silver key lay there, shining in the dim light. That key, she said, opens a box Janet left behind. And what's inside might change everything you think you know about her. My heart pounded. What do you mean? Before she could answer, my phone rang. It was Michael. I answered, and his voice came through the line, breathless and trembling. "Mom," he said, "you won't believe what I just found." The line went silent for a second, then I heard him whisper again, his voice shaking. "She's not dead." The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. The phone hit the floor with a soft thud, but my heart made a louder sound inside my chest. I bent down slowly, my hands shaking, and picked it up. "Michael, what do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely more than a breath. There was heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Then my son spoke again, slowly, like he could hardly believe his own words. "Mom, Janet is alive." I froze. Lily looked up from where she was kneeling on the floor, her eyes wide. "What did he say?" she whispered. "She's alive," I said, the words trembling as they left my mouth. For a moment, we both just stared at each other. The rain outside grew louder, beating against the windows like drums. Then Michael's voice came through again. "I found her. She's in a small house on Miller Street. She's sick, but she's alive. Mom, I'm bringing her there right now." Before I could ask another question, the line went dead. I sat down slowly on the chair beside the table. My mind spun like a wheel on a muddy road. Janet, alive. That couldn't be true. The woman we had prayed for, the woman Lily said had died 2 years ago. How could that be? Lily stood up quickly and began pacing the small living room. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "I saw her name in the bank's record of deceased clients. I saw the date of death myself. How could she still be alive?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was stare at the key she still held tightly in her hand. It gleamed under the light, small but somehow powerful, like it was holding secrets too heavy for its size. The minutes that followed felt like hours. The rain slowed, then stopped. The air smelled clean and sharp, like the world had washed itself. Then, finally, we heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. Michael burst through the door, soaked from the rain. Behind him was a woman wearing a long gray coat and a scarf that covered half her face. She was thin, her steps slow, but her eyes were alive. "Grandma Grace," she said softly, her voice weak but kind. "You remember me, don't you?" I stood, staring for a few seconds before nodding. "Janet," I said, tears already forming in my eyes. "You were sick. We prayed for you at church. We thought you." She smiled faintly. "I know. I let everyone believe I was gone. I moved away to a small town when my son passed. I couldn't bear to see anyone. I thought I'd start over somewhere else, where no one knew me. But I didn't die." Lily looked pale. "Then who recorded your death?" she asked, her voice trembling. Janet looked at her and gave a tired smile. "When I left the city, I asked my lawyer to close my accounts and mark them inactive. I didn't know that would be listed as a closure due to death. I guess the system just did what it does." Michael sighed and rubbed his forehead. "So all this time, my mother was getting money from someone we thought was dead, but who's been alive and silent all along." Janet nodded slowly. "I didn't send the money, though. I didn't even know. But," she looked at Lily. "You used my name, didn't you?" Lily lowered her eyes and nodded. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to hurt you or anyone. I just wanted to do what you had planned, to help her." "You wrote her name in your notes at the bank." Janet's lips parted slightly. "I did write her name. I wanted to send her help, but I never got the chance." She turned toward me. "You prayed for me when my child was sick, remember? You came every day with food and songs. You told me that even when things look dead, God can bring them back to life." Those words saved me. Tears streamed down my face. "Then why didn't you come back, child?" I whispered. "I was ashamed," Janet said softly. "After my son died, I blamed myself. I couldn't face the church, or the people who cared for me. I thought everyone would see me as a failure. I never knew that kindness could still wait for me here." For a moment, the room was filled with nothing but quiet breathing and the sound of the clock ticking. Then Michael spoke. "What about the key?" he asked. "What's in the box?" Janet looked surprised. "The box." Lily quickly held it up. "This," she said. "You left it at the bank. I found it with your file." Janet stared at it for a moment, then smiled faintly. That box isn't mine anymore, she said. It belongs to her. She looked at me. To Mrs. Grace. My heart jumped. To me. She nodded. I left it with a letter years ago, before I moved away. The key was meant to be sent to you, but I guess it got lost in the process. It's all there, everything I wanted to give you. Michael looked at the key, then at me. Where's the box, Mom? I shook my head. I don't know. Lily, do you know where it is? Lily nodded slowly. It's at the bank. I never opened it. I thought it wasn't right to look inside something that wasn't mine. Michael turned to Janet. So, you want us to open it now? Janet took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, it's time. We all got into the car together, me, Michael, Lily, and Janet. The sky was gray, but the rain had stopped. Completely. The roads were wet and shiny, reflecting the streetlights like glass. The drive to Maple Trust Bank was quiet, except for Janet's soft humming in the back seat. It was the same hymn we used to sing together at church. My heart felt heavy and light at the same time. When we reached the bank, the manager recognized Lily right away. He nodded politely and led us to the safe deposit room. The metal door was large and cold, and it made a deep sound when it opened. Lily walked up to the safe box and slipped the tiny silver key into the lock. She turned it slowly. Click. The box opened with a soft sound, and inside was a small leather-bound notebook, a folded letter, and a gold pendant with a cross. Janet took the notebook with trembling hands. This is my son's, she said softly. He used to write letters to God in here before he died. I wanted you to have it, Grace. You were his favorite person at church. He said you reminded him of hope. My eyes filled with tears again. I reached out and touched the notebook gently. Oh, my dear child, I whispered. This is worth more than all the gold in the world. Janet smiled weakly. There's more, she said. She handed Michael the folded letter. This one is for you. He opened it and read silently. Then his lips began to tremble. Mom, he said quietly, handing me the letter. I looked down at the paper. The handwriting was neat but shaky. To Mrs. Grace, the woman who taught me to pray when I couldn't breathe. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to thank you in person. You told me that even pain can grow flowers. I hope you'll keep planting those flowers for others. I'm leaving something small for you, so you'll never have to worry about the light bill again. With love, Janet and Samuel. Attached to the letter was a document. Michael unfolded it, and his eyes widened. It was a deed. Janet smiled faintly. It's a small property, just a little building near the church. I wanted to leave it for her. For all she did for us. I covered my mouth. My heart was pounding. Janet, I can't take this, I said. You've already given me enough. You have to, she said gently. Because I already gave it. It's yours, Grace. It always has been. Lily wiped her tears. You see, Michael, none of this was meant to hurt anyone. It was meant to bless her. Michael looked at all of us, then at the deed in his hand. His face softened completely. He exhaled and said, I understand now. He turned to me. Mom, you were right. It's not money that keeps you alive, it's the love behind it. For the first time in a long while, I smiled through my tears. Yes, son, I said quietly. The church, kindness, and love, that's what keeps me alive. But just as we were about to close the box and leave the bank, Janet suddenly gasped and held her chest. The color drained from her face. Janet, Michael shouted, rushing to her side. She staggered, her breath shallow. I think it's happening again, she whispered. Her knees buckled, and she fell against Lily's arm. The gold pendant slipped from her hand and hit the floor, spinning in circles. The sound echoed through the cold bank hallway as I screamed her name. The moment Janet fell, everything turned into a blur. Michael caught her before she hit the floor, shouting her name over and over. Janet, stay with me, he cried. Lily ran to call for help while I knelt beside them, holding her cold hand. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes fluttering. Don't cry, she whispered weakly, her voice breaking between breaths. It's just my heart. It does this sometimes. Michael's face was pale. We're taking you to the hospital, he said, his voice shaking. Hang on, Janet, please. The bank manager rushed over, and within minutes, they had called an ambulance. I could hear the faint wail of sirens approaching. I held her hand tighter. "You'll be fine, child," I whispered. "You've come too far to stop now. God didn't bring you here to end it like this." Janet tried to smile, but her lips only trembled. "Grace, the property, the letter, you must keep it safe," she murmured. "Promise me." "I promise," I said, tears running down my cheeks. "But you'll be there to see it with your own eyes, you'll see how it helps others." The paramedics arrived and lifted her onto a stretcher. Her body looked small and fragile under the bright white sheets. As they wheeled her out, she turned her head slightly and looked back at me. "Tell the church, tell them I never stopped believing," she whispered before the doors closed. We followed the ambulance to the hospital. The drive felt endless. Every red light was a mountain in the road. I prayed silently the whole way, my fingers gripping my rosary so tightly that the beads dug into my skin. When we arrived, doctors rushed her into the emergency room. We waited outside, sitting in silence. The white walls, the antiseptic smell, the cold air, all of it felt heavy. Michael sat with his hands pressed together under his chin, his face buried in thought. Lily sat beside him, quietly crying. I looked at both of them and said softly, "This is what life teaches us, money cannot fix everything. Love, prayer, and forgiveness are the only things that hold us when the world shakes." After what felt like hours, a doctor came out. His expression was serious but calm. "She's stable," he said. "It was a mild heart attack, but she's responding to treatment. She'll need rest and medication." We all exhaled at once. Relief washed over me like a warm tide. The doctor continued, "She's asking to see someone. Mrs. Grace." I stood slowly, holding my bag to my chest, and followed him into the room. Janet lay on the bed, hooked to small tubes and monitors. Her eyes opened when she saw me, and she smiled faintly. "You kept your promise," she said. "You always do." I sat beside her and held her hand. "Rest now," I said softly. "You're safe." She turned her head slightly toward me. "Grace, there's one more thing," she whispered. "Inside that building I left for you, there's something hidden under the floorboard near the altar. It's for the church. I wanted it to become a place of hope." I frowned slightly. "A place of hope." She nodded weakly. "You'll understand when you see it." Her eyelids fluttered, and she drifted into sleep. I sat there for a long time, holding her hand, praying quietly. The machines beeped softly in rhythm with her heart. That night, when we returned home, Michael stayed unusually quiet. He helped me take off my coat and poured me a cup of tea. "Mom," he said after a long pause, "you've spent your whole life giving to people. I think it's time we help you build something lasting, something that honors you and her." I looked up at him and smiled faintly. "I don't need anything grand, son. Just keep your heart open and your hands kind." He nodded slowly. "Maybe both." Lily touched my shoulder gently. "We'll visit the property tomorrow," she said. Maybe what she meant will make sense then. I agreed, though my mind still spun with questions. What was under the floorboard? What had Janet been hiding all this time? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the moonlight spill through the trees, and whispered, "Lord, whatever secret lies there, let it bring peace, not pain." The next morning, we drove to the property. It was a small white building near the edge of town, quiet and surrounded by flowers. The key fit perfectly into the lock, and as the door creaked open, a wave of calm air greeted us. Dust floated in the sunlight like tiny gold stars. It was beautiful but old, wooden benches, a small altar, and faded curtains. The floorboards creaked under our feet. Lily walked to the front and knelt near the altar. "She said something was hidden here," she said. Michael grabbed a crowbar from the car and carefully lifted one of the old boards. Underneath, wrapped in a piece of cloth, was a small metal box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a thick envelope and a photograph. The photo showed Janet's son, Samuel, smiling in front of this same building, holding a sign that read, "The House of Hope." The envelope had a note and a document inside. Michael opened it and read aloud, "To whoever finds this, I want this place to become a shelter. A home for those who have lost everything, where prayer and kindness can feed the soul. I call it the House of Hope. Please, make it live." I pressed my hands to my chest. Tears filled my eyes. She wanted this to be for others, not just me. Michael smiled. Then that's what we'll do. We'll rebuild it, in her name and yours. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by dust and sunlight, we all felt it, the same spirit that had filled our church for years. Love, reborn again. But before we could even close the box, my phone rang. It was the hospital. The nurse's voice trembled as she spoke. Mrs. Grace, I'm so sorry. Janet's heart failed this morning. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. The room spun. I sank to my knees. Lily and Michael ran to me, but all I could whisper was, she finished her race. The gold pendant from the bank, which I had kept in my pocket, fell to the floor. It glimmered in the light like a small sun. I picked it up and said softly, she gave her last breath to leave hope behind. Michael knelt beside me. We'll keep it alive, Mom, he said. We'll make her dream real. And I nodded through my tears, clutching the pendant to my chest. Yes, I whispered. For Janet. For the church. For everyone who still believes in love. The day of Janet's burial was quiet, but the whole church came. The choir sang softly, the same hymn she used to hum. Pastor Thomas spoke gently about a woman who gave without wanting to be known, who loved with all she had, and who found peace in helping others. I stood beside the casket, my fingers tracing the edge of the gold pendant she had left me. The pendant had now become a symbol, the mark of a heart that had loved beyond its own pain. Michael stood beside me, his hand firm on my shoulder. Mom, he whispered, we'll finish the House of Hope. I've already called a contractor. I want to turn that place into a home for widows, orphans, and anyone who has nowhere to go. I looked up at him, my eyes wet but warm. You've grown, my son. That's all I ever wanted, to see you live with a heart that gives. Lily stood on my other side, holding the blueprints she and Michael had drawn. We'll name one of the rooms after her son, Samuel, she said softly. And one after you, Mom. I smiled faintly. No, name it after the people who will come there. It's not about us, it's about what love leaves behind. After the service, as people began to leave, Pastor Thomas approached me. Grace, he said kindly, you've taught this church more about faith than any sermon could. Janet's story will live on through you. That evening, we went back to the little white building. The sunset painted everything in gold. The flowers outside swayed gently in the wind. Michael placed a wooden sign at the front that read the House of Hope, in loving memory of Janet Miller and Samuel. We stepped inside, and I felt a warmth that words could not hold. The benches had been dusted, the altar cleaned, and a vase of fresh lilies stood in the corner. Lily had placed them there that morning. Michael looked around and said quietly, she didn't just give money. She gave meaning. I nodded. And love always finds its way back, no matter how long it takes. We prayed together. As I opened my eyes, I saw light streaming through the window, landing exactly where the metal box had been buried. It felt like Janet's spirit was smiling at us. Weeks later, the shelter opened its doors. People came, women with children, old men with no family, young souls trying to find faith again. Every Sunday, the church choir came to sing there. It became a living song of second chances. Sometimes I sit in the front row, watching new faces fill the room. I see tears turn into smiles. I see strangers becoming family. And every time I look at the cross on the wall, I whisper, thank you, Janet. You never really left. One evening, as I was locking the door, Michael came by with flowers. Mom, he said, there's something you should know. We found out who's been donating to keep the shelter running. Someone has been sending $10,000 every month under a new name, Hope's Hand Foundation. I raised an eyebrow. And who's behind it? He smiled. I traced it. It's from an account Janet opened before she died, under your name. She must have arranged it in advance. My eyes filled with tears again. She thought of everything, I whispered. That night, I went home and sat by my window. The wind was gentle, and the stars looked brighter than usual. I thought about my son, about Lily, about Janet, about Samuel, and about the church that had kept me alive. Love had circled back, just like it always does. As I whispered my last prayer before bed, I smiled and said softly, the church still keeps me alive, but now, so does the House of Hope. The clock ticked softly, the light faded, and somewhere far above, I believe Janet and her son were smiling too. If this story touched your heart, drop a heart in the comments, share it with someone who loves their mother, and don't forget to subscribe, because more real-life stories like this are coming that will move your soul and remind you what love truly means.